Do you find it difficult to come up with content ideas for your podcast? Or perhaps you've gotten stuck during an interview with a guest where you have just nothing else to ask? Try Poddex today. Poddex is the best all-in-one podcast idea generation tool. You get everything from episode ideas to interesting conversation starters for interviews, engaging discussion topics for your live streams, and even social media content ideas. With this tool, you don't have to spend weeks trying to come up with content for an episode or unique questions for your guest. Just shuffle the cards and pick one at random, hit the record button, and get started. Now you can make better content, have more fun while at it, and get your viral moment, all with Poddex. Head over to poddex.com and use code C4C at checkout. Welcome to this special edition of the Dripping in Black podcast, Content Creators of Color exclusive premiere.
What's up, good people all across the world? This is the Dripping in Black podcast. I am your host, David V. Lewis, and per usual, we have another fantastic guest. Today's guest is Jen Washington. Jen, say hello to the world.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so Jen is a fellow podcaster. We will get into what the podcast is and her story behind that, as well as how this interview came into being. But first, we always begin with a very simple question to introduce our guest to our audience. Some say it's not so simple. The question is, who are you? So who is Jen Washington?
Yeah, I would say that I am a urban professional, and I am a wife and sister and good friend. I care about my community. I love giving back, and I'm excited about what podcasting has brought into my life. So,
okay. Where are you? We're on Zoom, so where are you actually on the map?
yeah, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. St. Louis, Missouri. Were you born and raised there?
I was. So,
Okay. I've never been to St. Louis, Missouri. What can you tell me about it?
well, it is the show me state. So, in the home of Nelly, I'm sure you've heard of him.
I have.
Yeah, this is a good old Midwestern town, and yeah, it's home.
Okay. All right. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, you're a fellow podcaster. How did you end up on this podcast?
Yeah, so I actually was referred and recommended by Sean Smith. So I came to get to know Sean Smith through Clubhouse and networking with some really good and dope podcasters. And so, yeah, I was invited.
Okay. Excellent. So my producer, Sean Smith, aka S Squared, who's becoming the maestro of Clubhouse, has ran into quite a few talented people in the podcast world, and you happen to be one of them. All right, so let's get into it. I'm really excited to learn about this podcast because, I only know as much as Sean has told me. Okay. All right, so the name of your podcast is Woke by Accident, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about it. What is Woke by Accident?
Yeah, so Woke by Accident is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. And so here it is my outlet to give a voice to the voiceless. And I cover stories of social justice, missing persons. And I also have lately had a lot of interesting authors and podcasters on to share their story, or some life coaches, and just really wanted to be the core about social justice, really is the inspiration of this show. So.
Yeah, and so we know woke is to be aware of what's going on around you. So that kind of guides us to the social justice aspect. But what's the by accident part?
Yeah, so so the show is inspired by the events and aftermath of George Floyd murder and Mike Brown's case being reopened. His case happened back in 2014, but they quietly reopened it here right around the time I was about to launch. And so all that going on, I had all of these feelings, and people in my circle, we were just talking about what was going on and how we felt. And I just really wanted, felt like I wanted to do something. I actually did. For Mike Brown, I actually got involved, went out to Canfield and participated in my sorority, helped that community there. And I also had the opportunity to work on a campaign that really was related to the Mike Brown case. And so that's kind of the heartbeat and the efforts behind Woke by Accident. And so I saw an offer on Instagram on how you could start a podcast in 30 days. And so I was like, well, I could do that, because I actually am a big fan of mini podcasts. Just a big fan of all the podcasts. So I'm a kind of a writer, journalism background, in college, and I saw this as an opportunity to bring all my skills and my feelings and want to make a change. And so I did this course, this 30-day Instagram course. That's kind of skeptical about it. But we're on this big Zoom call, and we're talking about what everybody wants to do their podcast on. And so I said, I wasn't trying to be this woke person. It was really kind of an accident. And they're like, wait, that's it. That's it. It was like, I am woke. It was just like, I wasn't trying to be, but, I'm just compelled to do this. Like, it really was just like kind of a calling. And so, Woke by Accident kind of just came out in a Zoom meeting for the podcast course that I did. And so it's been working out. I hit a year in May, and we're still rolling. So,
man, dope story. We have some common threads there. I know I myself was motivated as well by the George Floyd incident to find something productive to do as a response. And part of what we do here with Dripping in Black is awareness as well, making people aware that most Black people are actually doing excellent things. Most Black people don't spend their time in the streets, regardless of how they portray us in mainstream media. You would think, everybody in our family is street affiliated if you go by the mainstream media. But actually, we know the vast majority of the people that we know are not street related. We may know some street people, but the vast majority of the people we are in contact with are not street. So part of our podcast was to kind of get that awareness out there about Black excellence and how commonplace it is in our communities, and try to counter that narrative. And so having guests like you on go a long way towards that. It's great when somebody sees a vacuum and then fills that vacuum, right? Yes. So let's talk about, so you were motivated by George Floyd, and you mentioned you have a journalist background.
Yes.
When did you get the penchant to be a journalist?
Well, so I've always wanted to be a journalist, and I really can kick myself for going into a different career field, because my 9-to-5 is not, a journalist. So it's only when I go in the back cave and put on my cape that I become, Woke by Accident host and journalist. And I'm okay with that. But yeah, I actually am a finance and banking professional, mortgage professional. in my 9-to-5 life, but I've always loved to write, and it was just really one of my strengths in school. So,
okay.
and
All right.
communication.
So we're here at Woke by Accident now. And you said it's been a year?
It was a year in May.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, so you're actually approaching 2 years now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So how would you, I'm going to ask you to rank it, where you are now on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 meaning my podcast sucks, nobody cares about it, and 10 meaning, oh, we the best podcast that's around. There's nothing we can do to improve upon what we're doing. Where would you place yourself on that 1 to 10 scale?
Well, I definitely don't suck, but I'm not at the top. I'm not at the top either. I'm definitely growing. This period of the podcast is about growth and development. Definitely. I am investing in myself and involved in a podcast coaching situation right now to sharpen my tools and skills. I'm aligning myself with other like-minded people to get better. I actually have a life coach. You know what I mean? I'm really trying to improve this and make this a business. I really want to impact people. I'm not so concerned with making money, but I really want to make an impact. And so I definitely want to expand my reach so I can, definitely try to help more people. I have goals and plans, so I'm very hopeful about it. And it's important because a lot of people did what they call pod fade, and they faded away. A lot of good friends that started when I started are no longer doing this and like cringe and, they don't want to even talk about podcasting. So to still have that enjoyment and love for it is great. And so it's enjoyable for me. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but money would go a long way in making that impact a little greater, wouldn't it?
Oh, sure. And so it'll come, as I learn and develop, I feel like there are opportunities for that. And so it's just a matter of time, I'm sure. So.
So the Jen Washington of today is able to go back in time and tap on the shoulder of the Jen Washington who had this idea for a podcast. What's some advice you would give her?
So how far are we going back? I mean,
as far back as you want to go.
Yeah,
just think
definitely.
about you carrying what you know now back into whatever time you want to carry it and give advice to yourself.
Oh, definitely. So I would go back to college, I guess, and stick to my guns, if you will, and stay with the journalism craft and not be a chicken and get on somebody's plane and go get a job somewhere. I think that was part of my hindrance is, being scared to leave home and, being a mama and daddy's girl and being apprehensive about leaving home, because most journalism jobs, you have to go to a small town and kind of get your feet wet before you really get something significant. For the people who I do know and have journalism careers, they had to branch out and not be fearful. And I think back in that time, who I was then, I was scared. I didn't want to leave home. I wanted to... and so you just can't be scared like that. You just really have to take that leap. And I would definitely tell myself, hey, don't be scared. Take that leap. You can do it.
Yeah. And so, so you had this fear that kind of held you back from your journalism track initially, but then you find it, I guess, as a result of George Floyd, right? And that's what leads to Woke by Accident.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
and just wanting to make a change. So
yeah. But it does take a leap of faith, right, to get out there. Even going into the Instagram class about podcasting, that takes a leap of faith.
Right.
Yeah. So you found that within yourself to actually do that, right? And then you brought this thing to life. All right. So let's talk about this. You have the podcast. I don't think you gave me a number. That was kind of some slick evading, actually, almost, but you got caught. So 1 to 10, What's the number you're going to place on it?
Okay, so we'll go with a strong 6.
Okay. All right, good. So you're at a 6, and you're doing what you're doing now at the level of 6. When you hit 10, describe to me what's going on with your podcast.
Yeah, so I'm definitely monetizing, have increased downloads, have some YouTube and video presence and subscribers that are pouring into the cause. Our second spin-off podcast has launched, and yeah, I have some plans.
Okay. All right. And so a couple of more questions. I always, I'm a teacher by trade, so I always have a tendency to think about the youth, and when having a guest on, how the youth can tap into that guest's wisdom, right? So kind of knowing what you know now, what are some challenges you face, and how did you go about overcoming them, and just creating this podcast? What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, and so still kind of going through some of that. My downloads are not, so high, and as especially getting started, and I guess I don't scream from the mountaintops that I have a podcast, and that's probably why I didn't have a lot of listenership in the beginning. I didn't really utilize my social network like I could have, and now I'm just kind of getting into that, inviting all of my Facebook friends to like my Facebook page, and just really sharing it more, because some people say, you have a podcast? I didn't know that. I was just like, yeah, I do. And it's like, it's not a secret or anything like that, but it's not something that I shout from the mountaintops. It's like, if you know about it, but I need to really own it and be, in a point where I do want to shout it from the mountaintops. And so that's going to come with the growth that I'm working on now, to push it. Because if I don't push it myself as the creator, how am I expecting anyone on the other side to get it? But now with networking with other podcasters and collaborating, bringing people on as co-hosts and things like that, I'm seeing my numbers move. And so it's really possible, because at one point I felt like no one's listening to this thing. I'm looking at my analytics, and it's like, okay, somebody in Germany is out there. And but
and that's always interesting for us podcasters to see how far reaching it is. So with Dripping in Black, we have a global mission to spread the word about Black excellence. Our numbers do show us that we have people all across the globe listening and watching. So with that being said, speak to our audience. To get you from the 6 to the 10, what is something that our audience can do tangibly to help you get there?
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that. So I would love if people would tune in. I've really have been pushing myself to have some interesting guests on, and collaborators that would bring some interesting perspectives on, and not just your normal, because anybody can give a news commentary, but I feel like I have a unique voice and something special with this podcast, and I definitely want to share. So I would love a listen and support. So I've got my website going, and I'm working on great content to put out. So yeah, they can certainly tune in to the audio podcast, which is available on most of your favorite streaming platforms.
Okay. Yeah. Drop all that information. Where can they find you? Social media, audio platform, and your website, all of that information for the audience.
Yes, and so my website is www.wokebyaccident.net, and I am available on like your most favorite streaming platforms, from Apple to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean, and the such. So, Woke by Accident podcast is the name.
Yeah. And can people through social media kind of keep conversation going and reach out to you through social media as well?
Oh, definitely. And so we definitely have a great Instagram presence, and I try to put out some interesting reels that people can check out and respond back to. Woke by Accident podcast is the handle for Instagram, and on Twitter it's Woke by.
Okay. All right. Excellent. That brings us to the final question, the most important question that I ask of our podcasters. Are you ready? I mean,
Okay.
all interviewees, I should say. Are you ready for that final question?
Sure.
All right. Have you ever been on the cover of a magazine?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, one of the things we do here at Dripping in Black is we aim to please. We have guests that have been on covers and guests that have not. But what we do regardless is place them on the cover of our Dripping in Black magazine.
What?
All right. So my producer, S Squared, Sean Smith, is going to pull up your cover.
Oh, wow. Hey, I love it.
All right. And that is not just a Dripping in Black cover, but also a parting gift for you. All right. So we will get that printed out for you, have it laminated, and send it to you by mail.
Really?
At a later date.
You're kidding. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look over my shoulders, besides Barack and Michelle, of course, there are several of our guests from our first season. I got to get busy and put some of the second season and some of our other guests from first season up on my what I call my wall of fame. But those are some of our Dripping in Black covers from previous episodes. So
that's great.
You will join them in that, and we will send you out one as a thank you for coming out.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any shout outs you want to give before we close this episode?
I would give a shout out to our content creators of color, fellow podcasters.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So we want to thank Miss Jen Washington for joining us here at Dripping in Black. But again, thank you, Jen Washington.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You have just experienced a Dripping in Black production.